Hey guys, this video is going to be a slightly different one. It'll be a bit more of me just sort of ranting about the state of PC ports, but having played namely the two biggest releases of the last week and probably the last month, is of course the PC version of GTA 5, long awaited, and of course Mortal Kombat X, which launched on consoles and PC at the same time, day and date. Unlike MK9, which I think I launched 2 years after on the PC, around the time of Injustice, maybe just before Injustice, but that didn't quite launch the same day, but this one did, thankfully. So I've been messing around with both those ports. I know John's been playing the Xbox One version of Mortal Kombat, but I've been just messing with the PC version and put a good 15 or so hours into it. Finished the story, put a decent amount of time into multiplayer and the crypt and all sorts of all the other various modes and stuff, but. This isn't really going to be talking about the actual quality of the game because that's a whole different issue. There's going to be, John's got his review coming up on the site and he's going to have a Let's Talk coming up as well. So I'll leave that up to him, but I'm just going to be talking about the quality of the PC port because having played Mortal Kombat X and GTA 5, both of which are very different quality ports, which we'll get into, but Mortal Kombat X is to put it lightly, it's not a great port. I don't want to be too harsh on it because my experiences have been getting better. They were very poor on launch day for sure, and then a couple of days after that. But now, almost a week after launch, it's sort of settled down a bit, and I've been getting slightly better performance online and stuff. But the main issue, well, there's a number of issues with the port. Really, it's number one, it's poorly optimized. It's really poorly optimized. It runs like absolute garbage, which playing it side by side with GTA 5, comparing those two together, it really makes it stand out just how bad the MK export is because I've got a moderately decent PC. It's not amazing, but it's pretty decent. I've got a 760 and a pretty decent processor, so it's not too bad, but I can run GTA on like high at about 60 FPS, pretty constant, without much trouble. But Mortal Kombat X is a weird one because I just don't really understand how they can sort of like fuck up such a port of a fighting game because to me at least they seem from a performance end they seem kind of basic. I mean I don't want to I don't want to speak out of turn because I don't really know what I'm talking about, but to have a game where you're effectively rendering two characters on a fairly small stage with whatever effects are going on in the background, spell effects or ability effects or whatever, particle effects and all that on top of it doesn't seem like that much, and it is a very good looking game. It's got some, the character models look great, the stages generally look pretty good, there's some really nice weather effects and particle effects, mainly on the stages that for me run the worst. And I generally have the game on like medium high, so I could bump the settings down a bit, and I have been messing with that to try and get better performance because obviously in a fighting game performance is the most important thing. But it's just unfortunate that it runs so bad. But that's not the only issue with it. It's also there were some pretty complicated and convoluted issues at launch with the game, namely that the way that they packed it up or packaged it on Steam was kind of a weird one. So basically, if you're familiar with Blizzard games, if you are familiar with the Blizzard launcher and the way that they sort of package their own games, particularly stuff like World of Warcraft and like Diablo or whatever, they have a system where you can play the game before the full download is completed. You can effectively stream an incomplete game, and you'll have it won't be as it won't look as nice because obviously all the assets aren't in. It won't run as well because it's not completed or whatever. But you can still play the game after you download it. I want to say for WoW it's like 25% or something, a really small amount for you to for a huge game like that, and that really works really well for them. They are definitely the best at executing that type of thing. It's worked really well for them in the past. They've done it for quite some time, and it's generally very successful. But when Mortal Kombat tried it, it didn't really work the same way. It wasn't quite as effective. It was a bit sloppy. Basically, you download the initial download is a 3 GB download, even though the whole game takes up 30 GB. Okay, so you download the 3 gigs, and then you've got the core game, which in theory would allow you to play a very small chunk of the game, maybe like a couple of characters, a couple of stages. A very small amount. 'Cause it's like 3 GB, so it's like like 10% of the game or whatever. But and then you will have to download 29 updates, all the varying sizes, anywhere between like 500 megabytes to like upwards of like 2 or 3 gigabytes But the problem is that the whole idea of being able to stream the game, which, I'm only kind of assuming that is the idea, because otherwise why would you package the game in this way? It kind of makes no sense unless that has to be the only thing that comes to mind, is that they want you to be able to stream the game, like I said, like Blizzard games can. But the problem is that, for starters, that 3 GB gets you nothing. Like, I think myself, and I'm pretty sure most people, I don't think I've ever heard anyone saying that they managed to actually get anything done with that 3 GB. You download that and you get like the main menu, and that's about it. There's nothing that you can actually do with that, which is, fair enough, I guess, because it's 3 GB. But that initial download gets you nothing, and then it just seems kind of pointless, because you can't play the whole game unless you have, or at least from my experience, you can't play the whole game or any of the game to any reasonable degree without having downloaded the game and all 29 updates, which takes up like 30 GB. So, I don't know, maybe it's just my experience and the experience of people I know, and people who've tried this port, and from what I've read and stuff, but it doesn't seem like anyone had much luck with that system. So, I don't know if that was some sort of thing that NetherRealm wanted to do, if that's some sort of thing that Steam wanted to do for some reason, or, some sort of Warner Brothers initiative, but that was a really poor execution of potentially interesting system. And as we go forward and launches get bigger, the games get bigger themselves. You get games like GTA, which are like 60 GB download on PC and probably console. To be honest, they're probably rivaling that now. That PC downloads have always been, not always, but they've been large for a while now. Thinking back to like Max Payne 3 in like 2012 or 2011, or whenever that was like a 25 GB download on PC or something to that effect. It might be like 23 GB, which at the time was pretty unprecedented. That was pretty ridiculous. Just who had to download a like 23 GB download for one game, that was ridiculous. But now, that's the norm. If I bought a AAA game on PC or console, it was 20 GB, I'd be kind of impressed. Or it's just probably not a very big game, but GTA is like obviously a huge game, and that's like 60 GB. But then Mortal Kombat's like a fairly small fighting game. There's not that much to it technically, and that's still like 30 GB. So, but of course that's not the only issue with. They aren't the only issues with. But of course they aren't the only issues with the Mortal Kombat port. There are. Aside from the initial download troubles, the performance issues, there are also, at least from what I've been experiencing, a hell of a lot of frequent and very, very intrusive, well, obviously intrusive. There are a lot of frequent and very frustrating crash bugs. I have been experiencing a ton of those. I'd say probably I play about 5 games online, the game crashes. That's generally how it goes. I can't really play for more than 20 minutes without the game crashing, generally. At its worst, I should say. I've been having a bit more luck with that. I don't know if they patched it. I don't think I've downloaded the patch. I don't think there's been any patches yet, but for some reason it's been getting better. So, obviously that's a nightmare. Crash bugs are the worst, and to have it so frequently for me is obviously just a real pain, but really specific crash bugs as well, like when you go into the lobby of a game, for me at least, and I try and back out, the game just crashes every time without fail. So if I'm in a multiplayer lobby and I want to go back to the main menu, I have to close the game or allow it to crash and then open it again, which that seems like it's a pretty specific thing to me, because I know people who have also got the game and they've not had such an issue, but it's still a nightmare, and I'm sure that I'm not the only one who has this game on PC that has run into that issue. I'm sure it's probably quite a frequent issue, but yeah, like kind of a bit of a disappointment, especially considering the quality of like the MK9 and Injustice ports that were pretty good, to be honest. Injustice was a pretty good port. I seem to remember MK being a good port. It ran well. It looked pretty good. And I want to say the netcode was, or at least the online was pretty solid. I know it was kind of hit or miss, but I guess that's kind of the deal with most fighting games, is that the quality of the online is generally pretty hit or miss depending on who you're connecting with, who you're playing against, and their connection and your connection stuff. But yeah, it's really not a great port. I was pretty disappointed, to be honest. Still am. I still try and play it, and even in single player I get a pretty shitty frame rate, which it's very specific to stages. Some stages run fine, and some of the more detailed stages, generally the ones with weather effects, weirdly enough, generally run like shit. So And I've tried knocking down the graphics and stuff and turning off various effects, but it still runs like shit. So, which for a fighting game is the worst thing that you could possibly say about it. It's just that the performance is not there because obviously performance is so key to fighting games, as it is with you know as it is with like shooters or a fast-paced shooter like a Call of Duty or a Titanfall or whatever that needs to run at 60 even on a console. The performance is so key to the user experience and sort of the quality of. But then the other game, of course, which I did mention, was GTA 5. The PC port of GTA 5 came out. Long awaited. It's been delayed a couple of times. It was supposed to come out. I want to say it was supposed to come out in like November of last year, alongside the current gen console ports, the PS4 and Xbox One console ports of that game. But it got delayed a number of times, all the way into April, obviously now, and it's finally come out. And that was kind of a weird one because I expected that to kind of be a pretty. I wasn't expecting it to be a great port, I'd say, because Rockstar haven't got the greatest history with PC ports. The LA Noire one, I seem to remember, wasn't great. It was locked at 30, although you could unlock it. GTA 4 one is notoriously bad. A pretty old one, but the port of Bully is PC port of Bully isn't great. So they don't have a particularly great history of porting their games to PC. But I was very pleasantly surprised, and I think most people were, to find that the port of GTA 5 is actually excellent. It's a great port. It looks fantastic. Obviously, it runs really well. Again, on my decent-ish rig, 760 like I said before. But it's a great port. It has great controller support and great mouse and keyboard support. Both of those play really well. It has the great thing where you can just switch between the controls on the fly. So if you're using controller and you start using a keyboard or a mouse, it will just instantly switch, and vice versa, which allows you to really effectively switch between them at any time, which I actually do quite a lot when I'm sort of driving around. I'll use a controller, but then when I get into it like a shootout, I would generally just switch to a mouse and keyboard, just because the precision of a mouse is definitely because the precision of a mouse is definitely needed in those sort of situations, or it definitely helps anyway. But obviously, it has the first-person mode that came with the Xbox One and PS4 versions. That is in this game, of course, and I believe those console versions, there are pretty extensive options between customizing the first-person camera, customizing the third-person camera, setting defaults for presets for what you want to do when you get into a car or when you get out of a car or whatever. So you can pretty easily set that up on the fly, and if you're using a mouse and keyboard, you can actually rebound the thing to a more, whatever key you want. I just put on mouse button 4 or something. I put on one of my extra mouse buttons, but when I'm generally playing with a mouse and keyboard, but that's a great port. The GTA Online is pretty solid. That all works fine. It looks great, runs well, like I said, but it's not perfect. Obviously, like Mortal Kombat, it had some launch issues, but I believe, from what I know and from what I've heard, that the launch issues are pretty separate from the game. They were partially the fault of Steam rather than just Rockstar and GTA, of course. Unlike MK, which unless they change it, that will always be an issue for people initially downloading it. They will always come across the sort of weird streaming stuff and the problems there, whereas people downloaded GTA 5 from now and were at that problem because it was just like a specific problem to the launch day or whatever. Where and there was quite a lot of problems with the launch. To be fair, I had no problems. I managed to update it and just get in. But after I preloaded it before launch, a couple of days before launch, it became available to preload like a week early. It's like a huge download. It's like 60 gigabyte download. So I was able to preload it before launch and then quickly just get in, and I had no issues. I got in on launch day on the Tuesday, but I know people who have had. I know Tom had some issues getting it working. I know other people had issues getting it working. There were various fixes go around and problems, and you could do this to fix that and whatever. But generally, I think that most people just had to kind of wait. I know Tom just had to wait a couple of days or wait a day, and then it started working the next day. So that's kind of a weird one. But overall, it's a fantastic port, and it's just overall, it is a fantastic port, and it kind of puts MK to shame, to be honest. I know they're very different games, and like I said, I don't know anything about development, and I'm no developer, so I can't just pretend that that they should have done this, or this is how they should have done it because blah blah blah. Because I'm some sort of fake developer, but I don't know what I'm talking about with that stuff. So I can only sort of hypothesize from what I know, which is very little. But yeah, I don't know. I just kind of wanted to talk about the state of those two ports. I think that the I just wanted to talk about the state of those ports because uh, there have been plenty of issues in the past, many, numerous issues in the past, because there have been many issues in the past with bad PC ports of AAA games, specifically Ubisoft, which obviously has nothing to do with GTA 5 or Mortal Kombat, but just when I think of bad PC ports, Ubisoft springs to mind, AC3, some previous Assassin's Creed games, some of their other games, that didn't particularly have great ports, but I think it's an issue worth talking about because PC ports, or at least the PC, is becoming, or it has become such a prominent platform over the past 5 years. It kind of went into obscurity after the sort of early 2000s, I'd say, probably earlier than that, in like the late 90s. It kind of faded into obscurity and became less of a viable platform. It became less popular. People stopped developing for it, or at least they stopped trying to actually put decent work into their ports. I don't know. I think back to that, like the era of like I think back to like the era of like early 360 PS3 stuff, like just some really crappy ports. Just off the top of my head, I can't really think of any, but I know like just like stuff like Splinter Cell Double Agent, which I know is such a weird like pull, but off the top of my head, I remember that being such a shitty port, just riddled with awful DRM and stuff. But we're past most of that, and now people have realised that DRM. Most people have realised, most publishers, most developers have realised that DRM doesn't work in that way. You can't force people to have to download a client or whatever. You sort of that doesn't work. People will always find a way around, and you kind of just encourage people to pirate the game, which that's a whole different issue, which I'm not going to get into now. But people have realised, especially with the advent of Steam and stuff, and then that becoming so popular, that there are other ways to there are other ways to sort of control the PC version of your game to stop people from pirating. Whatever you could argue that the uses and implementations of DRM are for. People have realised that there are better ways around it. So just I think it's worth pointing out when the PC version of or any version of a game is a pretty poor one, and also pointing out when the PC version or any other version of a game is particularly good, like GTA. But that doesn't stop me from or it doesn't stop me from enjoying MK that much. Obviously, the frame rate stuff's a bit of a nightmare, and the crash bugs are just awful. But for the most part, when I get solid performance online or offline, it's a great game. I still really enjoy it. Again, I'm not going to get into the actual quality of the game because I do like the game, but that's kind of beside the point when I talk about the PC port. But yeah, I hope they come out with some patches for the PC port pretty soonish. I know Ed Boon's been talking on Twitter about how they're gonna get around to fixing some of the major issues with the port. So hopefully that happens pretty soon, and the PC version becomes more viable, because that should be a great version of a pretty great game. But gets bogged down with so many issues and just becomes the worst version of a great game. So that's me for today, I guess. Kind of a bit rambly. Just had some thoughts on these two PC ports, which I've been playing quite a lot of, but and wasn't sure how to articulate them. So this is the best you're gonna get. But thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more coverage of those games and their respective platforms. See you next time.